Some fights find you before you go looking for them. A stocky American tourist sits alone in an underground fighting bar in Bangkok. It is 1994. The place is packed with fighters and gamblers. Across the room, an undefeated Muay Thai champion spots him. The champion is feared across Southeast Asia. Iron shins, brutal knockouts. Nobody has ever put him down. He shoves the stranger hard, mocks his size, challenges him to the back alley. The crowd gathers. Bets are placed. The champion throws his first kick with full force. It never lands. A fist he never sees connects with his jaw like a freight train. His body hits the concrete. The world goes black. The last thing he hears is someone screaming in Thai. That's Mike Tyson. But what happens when he wakes up 11 minutes later with a shattered jaw? Hit like and subscribe for the full story. Now, let me take you back. Not far. Just a few hours before that fist changed everything. His name was Krit Somchai. And in 1994, in the world of underground fighting in Bangkok, that name meant something. It meant don't. Don't challenge him. Don't bet against him. Don't even look at him wrong. The man had over 40 professional wins. 0 losses. And those were just the sanctioned fights. The ones that made it into the records. The ones that happened in back alleys, in warehouse pits, in gambling dens across Southeast Asia. Those didn't get counted. But believe me, people remembered them. Krit wasn't big. 5'9", maybe 160 pounds soaking wet. But he had iron shins. The kind that come from years of kicking banana trees until the bone hardens and the nerves stop screaming. He had hands that could crack a coconut. And he had something worse than all of that. He had patience. Most fighters rush in. Krit waited. He watched you make your mistake. And then he made you pay for it. Now here's the thing about Krit. He didn't just fight for money. He fought because he believed, truly believed, that he was the most dangerous man in any room he walked into. And for a long time he was right. He had a ritual before every fight. He'd wrap his hands slowly, tight, methodical. Then he'd tie a red armband around his left bicep. A strip of sacred cloth, blessed by a monk from his home village. He'd worn it for every single fight since he was 19 years old. Never lost with it on. Not once. To Krit, that armband wasn't superstition. It was proof. Proof that the universe was on his side. The bar where it happened was called Soi Nak. Not the kind of place you'd find in a travel guide. No sign out front. No menu. Just a steel door in a narrow alley off Khao San Road. Inside it was packed. Fighters, gamblers, promoters, and the kind of men who only come out after midnight. The bar owner, a heavy man named Pong, kept a ledger behind the counter. A worn leather notebook. Every underground fight result was recorded in that book. Every name, every outcome. And if you flip to the section under Krit Somchai, you'd see something nobody else in that book could claim. An entire column of wins. Unbroken. Page after page. That night, Krit was drinking with his crew. 3 guys. All former fighters. All loyal. They'd been celebrating a payday from a fight 2 nights earlier. Krit had knocked out a Burmese champion in the second round. Clean. The man's corner threw in the towel before he hit the floor. So the mood was good. Krit was loose. Laughing. Feeling untouchable. And that's when someone at the table nodded toward the corner of the bar and said, "Look at that guy." A man sat alone. Stocky. Short. Thick neck. Wearing a plain black hoodie with the hood pulled low. He was drinking something clear. Not talking to anyone. Not looking at anyone. Just sitting there like he owned that corner of the room and didn't care who knew it. Now get this. In a bar full of fighters, nobody was sitting near him. Not because they knew who he was. They didn't. But something about the way he held himself. The stillness. The way his eyes moved without his head turning. It created a kind of invisible wall around him. Krit's crew started talking. One of them said the American looked soft. Another said he looked lost. A tourist who wandered into the wrong bar. Easy entertainment. Krit watched the man for a while. Took a long drink. Then he stood up. He walked across the bar. The noise dropped a little. People noticed when Krit moved with purpose. He stopped right in front of the American's table and looked down at him. The American didn't look up. Crit shoved the table hard. The drink slid and almost fell. The American caught it without flinching. Then he looked up. And this is the part that Crit would think about for years afterward. Because in that half-second, when the stranger's eyes met his, something passed between them. Not fear, not anger, something else. Recognition. The way one predator looks at another. A flicker, a warning, like a dog that doesn't bark before it bites. Crit ignored it. He'd never been wrong about a man's weakness. He pointed toward the back door and said 3 words in broken English. You, me, outside. The American stared at him for a long moment. Then he stood up, slowly, calmly, like a man who had done this 1,000 times before. The crowd moved toward the alley. Bets were placed fast. Every single one in Crit's favor. Crit was smiling. The American was not. The alley behind Soy Nok was narrow. Concrete floor. Brick walls on both sides. One bare bulb hanging from a wire above a back door. Maybe 50 people crammed in, pressing against the walls, standing on crates to get a better view. Money was still changing hands. Pong, the bar owner, stood near the door with his ledger open, recording the odds. Every single bet favored Crit. Every one. Crit rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck, settled into his stance. Low, balanced, hands up, elbows tight. The stance of a man who had done this hundreds of times. Around his left bicep, the red armband was pulled tight. Around his neck, a small Buddha amulet on a thin gold chain caught the light. His late trainer had given him that amulet 15 years ago. The old man had pressed it into Crit's palm the night before his first real fight and said, "This keeps you standing." Crit had never taken it off. Not once. The American stood at the other end of the alley, about 15 feet away. And here's what bothered Crit. The man had no stance, no guard. His hands were at his sides. His feet were shoulder-width apart. He wasn't bouncing. He wasn't circling. He was just standing there, breathing, looking at Crit the way a man looks at something he has already decided about. Crit read it as ignorance. A tourist who didn't know what was coming. So he decided to test him. He threw a low kick. Not full power. Maybe 70%. A sweep aimed at the outside of the left thigh. The kind of kick that buckles most men on the first shot. And missed. The American shifted his weight. Barely moved. Maybe 2 inches to the right. But the kick sailed past his thigh and hit nothing but air. The crowd murmured. Crit reset. Okay. The man had reflexes. That was fine. Reflexes don't save you from what comes next. He loaded up. Full power this time. A roundhouse aimed at the ribs. The kind of kick that had cracked ribs, collapsed lungs, ended fights in one shot. Crit had broken a man's floating rib with this exact kick 2 months earlier. He put everything into it. Hips, torque, that iron shin cutting through the air like a baseball bat. It never arrived. What happened next took less than 2 seconds. But Crit would replay it in his mind for the rest of his life. The American stepped inside the arc of the kick. Not backward, not to the side, forward, into it, closing the distance so fast that the kick lost all its power before it could connect. And in that same motion, the American loaded his right hand. Short, compact, no wind-up, no telegraph, just a piston fired from the hip. The punch connected with Crit's jaw. Right side, just below the ear. Now, I need you to understand something. Crit had been hit before. Hundreds of times. He'd taken elbows, knees, headbutts. He'd fought through broken noses and split eyebrows and kept going. He was tough in a way that most people never have to be. But this was different. This didn't feel like a punch. It felt like a car accident. Like the ground had jumped up and hit him from the side. Every nerve in his body went quiet at the same time. His legs didn't buckle. They just stopped existing. He dropped straight down. Vertical. Like someone had cut the strings holding him up. His body hit the concrete. The gold chain around his neck snapped on impact. The small Buddha amulet bounced off the ground, and he heard it crack. A tiny sound. But in the silence that followed, it was the loudest thing in the alley. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 50 people holding their breath. Then one voice, a man near the back of the crowd, screaming in Thai, "That's Mike Tyson. That's Mike Tyson." Chaos. People shoving. People running. Someone pulled out a camera. Pong slammed his ledger shut and disappeared inside. Crit's crew pushed through the crowd to get to him. But Crit didn't see any of it. He was gone. Unconscious before he finished falling. Tyson stood over him for a moment. Just a moment. Then he turned around and walked back into the bar. Alone. Unhurried. Like a man walking home from the store. 11 minutes. That's how long Crit was out. When he opened his eyes, he was lying on his back in the alley. His crew was around him. Someone had put a folded jacket under his head. The taste of blood filled his mouth. His jaw felt wrong. Heavy. Like it belonged to someone else. They took him to a street clinic 3 blocks away. The doctor confirmed it. Broken jaw. 2 fractures. It would need to be wired shut. Liquid diet. 8 weeks minimum. Crit sat on the clinic table while the doctor worked. He didn't flinch. He didn't speak. When his friend Somchai handed him the cracked amulet, Crit held it in his palm and stared at it for a long time. Then he asked one question. Who was he? They told him. His face went blank. That night, Crit sat in his apartment. Jaw wired shut. Ice pack against his face. The cracked amulet on the table in front of him. His crew had gone home. The apartment was quiet. And this is what he told himself. It was a lucky punch. A fluke. The American got lucky. That's all. It didn't mean anything. Crit would heal. He'd fight again. He'd win again. The red armband was torn, sure. He'd get a new one blessed. The amulet was cracked, but it still worked. He was still Crit Somchai. Still undefeated in every way that mattered. One punch from some tourist in an alley didn't change that. He sat there in the dark, jaw throbbing, telling himself this story. And for a brief, quiet moment, he almost believed it. 3 days later, Crit walked into his gym. And that's when the real fight began. The gym was half empty. On a normal morning, there'd be 15, maybe 20 fighters training. Bags swinging, pads cracking, music playing. That morning, there were 6. And when Crit walked through the door, 2 of them stopped what they were doing, grabbed their bags, and left without a word. Crit didn't understand. Not at first. Then Somchai pulled him aside and told him. Someone in the alley that night had a camcorder. A small handheld thing. They'd recorded the whole fight. And I use the word fight loosely, because what the tape showed was a man throwing one kick and then dropping like he'd been shot. 2 seconds. That's all it took. The tape had been copied. Passed around. Within 48 hours, every fighting gym, every gambling den, every underground ring in Bangkok had seen it. Crit watched the tape that afternoon. Somchai brought it to him on a borrowed VHS player. Crit sat on a folding chair in the back of his gym and pressed play. He watched himself throw the roundhouse. He watched the American step inside it. He watched the punch land. He watched his own body drop straight down like a puppet with cut strings. He watched Mike Tyson stand over him for 1 second. Then turn and walk away without looking back. Crit rewound it. Watched it again. And again. And again. Now here's where it turns. Because up until that tape, Crit's problem was physical. A broken jaw. Pain. Recovery time. Those things heal. But the tape changed the nature of the problem entirely. This was no longer about a punch. This was about identity. The tape was proof. Public, undeniable proof. That Crit Somchai, the most feared fighter in underground Bangkok, had been put to sleep by a man he challenged. In under 2 seconds. With one punch. And the consequences came fast. Fighters who had trained under Crit for years stopped showing up. Not all at once. But enough. They'd make excuses. Injuries. Family problems. Schedule conflicts. But Crit knew. They didn't want to train with a man who'd been humiliated on camera. Sponsors pulled out. A supplement company that had been paying Crit a monthly fee to wear their logo during fights quietly ended the arrangement. No phone call. Just a letter slipped under the gym door. Opponents who had once refused to face him now mocked him openly. One fighter from the Lumpini circuit gave an interview to a local fighting magazine and said, "Crit Somchai got knocked out by a tourist. Why would I waste my time?" That quote made the rounds. Crit heard it from 3 different people in the same day. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, Crit's jaw was still wired shut. He couldn't fight. He couldn't train. He couldn't even defend his own name. He was trapped in his own body, watching his reputation disintegrate in real time. So he did what a lot of proud men do when the world starts slipping away from them. He got obsessed. He stopped training other fighters. Stopped going to the gym most days. Instead, he sat in his apartment and studied. He got his hands on every VHS tape of Mike Tyson he could find. Every fight. Every interview. He watched Tyson destroy Michael Spinks in 91 seconds. He watched him dismantle Larry Holmes. He watched the speed, the angles, the way Tyson slipped punches like he could see them before they were thrown. And slowly something shifted inside Crit. The man who had knocked him out was not a tourist. He was not lucky. He was the youngest heavyweight champion in the history of boxing. A man who had knocked out men twice Crit's size with the same short right hand. A destroyer. The obsession turned dark. Crit stopped eating properly. Lost weight. Stopped leaving his apartment for days at a time. He replayed the alley tape and the Tyson fight tapes until the images burned into his mind. Somchai came to see him, his oldest friend, the only one who still showed up. He sat across from Crit in that small apartment and said what nobody else would. "The tape doesn't define you. You had a bad night. You picked the wrong man. It happens. Come back to the gym. Rebuild." Crit told him to get out. Somchai didn't move. He said, "You're killing yourself, Crit. Not with your fists. With your pride." Crit stood up, pointed at the door, and Somchai left. A week later, a promoter named Chai contacted Crit through one of his crew. Chai was offering a comeback fight. A low-level opponent. Someone Crit could beat easily. A simple win to get the name back in circulation. Clean slate. Fresh start. Crit turned it down. He didn't want a consolation fight. He didn't want to beat some nobody in a ring while the whole crowd whispered about the alley tape. He wanted Tyson. He wanted to stand in front of the same man and prove that the first time was a mistake. That he was still who he believed he was. He started making calls. Pulling old connections. Talking to promoters, gym owners, anyone who might know where Tyson was. Most people told him he was crazy. One promoter laughed in his face and hung up. Another said, "Crit, the man would kill you. You know that, right?" Crit didn't care. He wasn't thinking clearly anymore. This wasn't strategy. This was survival. If he couldn't undo that tape, he was nothing. And then, believe me when I tell you this, he got the one piece of information that changed everything. Tyson was still in Thailand. He hadn't left. He was training at a small Muay Thai gym on the outskirts of Bangkok. Alone. No entourage. No cameras. Crit had a target. And he had a plan. And every single person who knew about it, every friend, every fighter, every promoter, they all said the same thing. This is suicide. He found the gym on a Tuesday morning. It took him 3 days of asking around, following leads, bribing a tuk-tuk driver who claimed he'd dropped an American off at a place near the river. The gym was small, tucked behind a row of market stalls on the eastern edge of the city. No sign, just a corrugated metal roof over a concrete slab with a ring, 2 heavy bags, and a rack of pads. The kind of place where serious fighters trained and nobody else bothered to visit. Crit arrived just after 9. His jaw was still healing. The wires had come out 4 days earlier, but the bone was fragile. Talking still hurt. Eating solid food was a project. But he'd wrapped his hands that morning. Tight. Methodical. The way he always did. He didn't have the red armband anymore. It had torn that night in the alley and he never replaced it. But the cracked amulet was in his pocket. He carried it everywhere now. Not for luck. For anger. He stepped under the metal roof and stopped. There he was. Mike Tyson. Alone. No trainer. No entourage. No cameras. Just a man in a gray tank top and black shorts. Hitting a heavy bag with a rhythm that Crit recognized immediately. It was the rhythm of someone who had been doing this since before they could read. Natural. Effortless. Every punch landing with a sound that echoed off the concrete walls like a gunshot. Tyson saw him. He stopped hitting the bag, caught it with both hands, and looked at Crit. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then something shifted in Tyson's face. Recognition. He remembered. He knew exactly who Crit was. There was no crowd this time. No bets. No noise. No 50 people crammed into an alley. Just two men in a quiet gym with the sound of traffic somewhere in the distance. Crit spoke first. His jaw ached with every word. "Again," he said. That was all. One word. Tyson didn't respond. He just looked at him. Steady. Calm. The same stillness Crit had seen in the bar that night. The same quiet certainty. Crit didn't wait for an answer. He threw the first punch. A straight right aimed at Tyson's chin. Fast. Hard. Everything he had behind it. Tyson slipped it. His head moved 2 inches to the left and the punch sailed past his ear. Crit threw another. A left hook. Tyson blocked it with his forearm. Crit threw a knee. Tyson stepped back just enough to let it miss. And here's what broke Crit. Tyson wasn't fighting back. He wasn't throwing punches. He wasn't countering. He was absorbing, deflecting, moving, choosing not to fight. Every slip, every block, every small step backward was a decision. A deliberate, conscious choice to not destroy the man in front of him. Crit kept swinging. Wild now. Emotional. His technique was gone. No stance. No patience. No strategy. Just a man throwing his fists at something he couldn't beat and couldn't walk away from. His jaw screamed with every impact that jarred his skull. His lungs burned. His hands started to ache inside the wraps. He threw one more punch. A tired, sloppy right hand that had nothing behind it. Tyson caught it. Not blocked it. Caught it. Wrapped his hand around Crit's fist and held it still. Gently. Like a man catching a bird. Crit tried to pull back. Couldn't. Not because Tyson was squeezing, but because something inside him finally let go. The fight drained out of him all at once. His knees buckled. He sank to the floor. Tyson released his fist and Crit's hands dropped to his sides. He knelt there on the concrete, breathing hard, eyes burning. The pain in his jaw was blinding. The cracked amulet pressed against his thigh through his pocket. Tyson sat down across from him. Right there on the gym floor, cross-legged, close enough that Crit could have reached out and touched him. And he said something that Crit did not expect. "I know what it feels like, to lose who you think you are." Crit looked up. Tyson's voice was quiet, almost gentle. Nothing like what you'd expect from the man Crit had watched on those VHS tapes. He spoke plainly, simply, like he was talking to himself as much as to Crit. He talked about prison. About the years he lost. About waking up one morning and realizing that the man the world feared didn't exist anymore. About the difference between being feared and being respected. About how fear is something other people give you, and how they can take it away just as easily. But respect. Believe me, this is what he said. Respect is something you build inside yourself. And nobody can take that. Crit didn't understand every word. His English was limited. But he understood enough. He understood the tone. He understood the weight behind it. This was not a man giving a speech. This was a man sharing a scar. Now, if you've made it this far into the story, I need to ask you something. Do me a favor. If you're listening on your phone right now, just take a second and hit that subscribe button. That's all. It helps more than you know. And I promise you, the end of this story is worth staying for. Tyson reached behind him and grabbed a plain white towel from the edge of the ring. Nothing special about it. A cheap gym towel. He leaned forward and draped it over Crit's shoulders. A small gesture. The kind of thing a corner man does for a fighter after a hard round. Not pity. Not charity. Just one fighter taking care of another. Then Tyson stood up, nodded once, and walked out of the gym. Crit sat there for a long time, the towel on his shoulders, the cracked amulet in his pocket, the quiet pressing in around him. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just sat there and let something he'd been carrying for weeks finally settle. 6 weeks passed. Crit's jaw healed. Not perfectly. There was a slight click on the right side when he opened his mouth too wide. Permanent souvenir. But the wires were out. The swelling was gone. He could eat again. Talk again. And for the first time since that night in the alley, he could breathe without the weight of what had happened pressing down on every inhale. He went back to the gym. Not to fight. Not to train for a comeback. He went back because he didn't know where else to go. The place was nearly empty now. Most of his fighters had moved on. Found other trainers. Other gyms. The heavy bags still hung from the ceiling. The pads were still stacked on the shelf. But the energy was gone. The place felt like a room after a funeral. Somchai was there. Of course he was. The man had never stopped showing up, even after Crit threw him out that night. He was sitting on a bench near the entrance, wrapping his hands out of habit, the way old fighters do when they need to think. Crit sat down next to him. Neither of them spoke for a while. Then Crit said something he had never said before. Not to Somchai. Not to anyone. I was wrong. Somchai looked at him. Waited. I thought I was the most dangerous man in every room, Crit said. I wasn't. And when I found out, I tried to destroy myself instead of learning from it. Somchai nodded. He didn't say I told you so. He didn't need to. He just put a hand on Crit's shoulder and squeezed once. That week, Crit made a decision. He wasn't going to fight again. Not in the ring. Not in the alleys. Not underground. The red armband was gone. The unbeaten record was gone. The identity he'd built around those things was gone. And trying to get them back had nearly cost him everything that was left. Instead, he did something smaller. Something quieter. He opened the gym doors to beginners. Not champions. Not contenders. Kids. Street kids from the neighborhoods around the gym. Boys who had nothing and nobody. The kind of kids Crit had been 30 years earlier before anyone knew his name. He started with 3. A 14-year-old named Lek who had been sleeping in a market stall. A 16-year-old named Boone who had a temper that was going to get him killed. And a quiet boy named Chai who never spoke above a whisper but hit the pads like he was trying to punch through them. Crit trained them the way his old trainer had trained him. Slowly, patiently, he taught them stance, balance, timing. He taught them to wrap their hands properly. He taught them to breathe. And he taught them something his old trainer never had to teach him, because Crit hadn't been ready to hear it until now. He taught them that the most dangerous thing a fighter can do is believe that fighting is all he is. Now, I want you to picture this, because this is the part of the story that matters most. 3 months after that morning in Tyson's gym, Crit's first student fought his first official fight. Lek, the 14-year-old, skinny, nervous, standing in a real ring for the first time with a crowd of maybe 40 people watching. Before the fight, Crit knelt down in front of him. He reached into his bag and pulled out a white armband. Not red, white. He'd had it blessed at a temple the week before. He tied it around Lek's left bicep. Tight, the way he used to tie his own. Lek looked at him and said, "What if I lose?" And Crit said, "Then you learn something. And you come back." Lek won. A decision. Nothing spectacular. But clean. Disciplined. The kid fought the way Crit had taught him. Patient. Controlled. Smart. Crit stood outside the ring and watched. And he felt something he hadn't felt since before that night in the alley. Not pride in himself. Pride in someone else. It was a different kind of feeling. Quieter. Steadier. It didn't need a crowd. It didn't need an armband. It didn't need an unbroken column of wins in a leather ledger. Speaking of that ledger, a few weeks later, Crit visited Soy Nok one last time. The bar hadn't changed. Same steel door. Same narrow alley. Same smoke. Pong was behind the counter, same as always. He saw Crit walk in and his face did something complicated. Part surprise. Part respect. Part guilt. Crit didn't stay long. He ordered 1 drink. Sat at the bar. And Pong, without being asked, pulled out the old leather ledger and set it on the counter between them. Crit opened it. Found his page. The long column of wins was still there. Every name. Every date. every result. And at the bottom, a blank space where the next win should have been. Pong reached over and turned to a new section in the back of the book. A section Crit had never seen before. It was labeled Trainers. And at the top of the first page, in Pong's careful handwriting, was a name. Crit Samchai. Underneath it, 3 names. Lek, Boon, Chai. His students. A new column. A new beginning. Crit stared at it for a long time. Then he closed the book, finished his drink, and walked out. He still had the cracked amulet. He kept it in a small wooden box on the shelf above his bed. Not because it meant what it used to mean, but because it reminded him of the man he was before, and the man he didn't want to be again. And that white towel, the one Tyson draped over his shoulders in the gym that morning. Crit hung it on a hook near the entrance of his gym. It was the first thing his students saw when they walked in. None of them knew what it meant. None of them asked. But Crit knew. It meant that the strongest thing a man can do is not always the punch. Sometimes it's the open hand. He thought about Tyson's words often. About losing who you think you are. And he realized slowly over time that the man who walked into that alley was undefeated. But the man who walked out of that gym on the outskirts of Bangkok. The man who knelt in front of a skinny 14-year-old and tied a white armband around his arm. That man was something better. He was free. Some fights find you before you go looking for them. But the ones that change you, those are the ones you never saw coming.